Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're stepping into the shoes of a methodical prosecutor presenting the state's case to a jury. We are going to completely deconstruct a really chilling sequence of events that took place in July 2023 down in Ponca City, Oklahoma. We're going to look at exactly how investigators dismantled a suspect's web of lies, piece by piece, using irrefutable physical, medical, and digital evidence. You see, when a 2-month-old infant named Cora was rushed to the hospital with catastrophic injuries, her babysitter claimed it was just a spontaneous medical emergency. But as we'll see, the evidence tells a vastly different story. Here is how we're going to break this down today. 1. The morning timeline. 2. The anatomy of a lie. 3. The medical evidence. 4. Digital breadcrumbs. And finally, 5. The verdict and the past. All right, let's start with Exhibit A, the morning timeline. You know, in almost any investigation, time is literally a detective's best friend. And the chronology of the morning of July 14th is our very first indicator that something is terribly, terribly wrong here. The babysitter, 26-year-old Holly Shepard, gave investigators this highly specific account of her morning. She stated that right around 10:15 a.m., she gave baby Cora a bottle. She claimed the baby fell asleep, so she placed her in a crib. Then, according to Holly, at exactly 10:35 a.m., she heard Cora let out this sudden, piercing scream cry. Just 2 minutes later, at 10:37 a.m., Holly dials 911, reporting that the baby was suddenly going limp and breathing funny, basically suggesting a spontaneous seizure. But this incredibly tight chronological map immediately raises red flags. Think about it. How does a perfectly healthy 2-month-old suffer a massive, life-threatening brain trauma in a mere 20-minute window of taking a nap? To figure that out, investigators had to establish exactly who had access to the infant during that critical window. Now, Holly insisted she wasn't alone. She claimed her mother-in-law, Doretta, and Doretta's sister, Doreen, were right there inside the living room with her. She even tried to hint that Doretta, who suffered from dementia, might have been alone with the baby. But here's the catch, and it's a big one. Witness testimony completely shattered this alibi. Both Doretta and Doreen independently confirmed they had actually stepped outside into the yard to load air conditioning units. They were not in the house. This physically proves Holly was completely alone with baby Cora when the injuries happened. So her very first line of defense, blaming others, was an absolute fabrication.
Moving on to Exhibit B, Anatomy of a Lie.
Once investigators established that Holly was the only adult in the room, they really began to apply pressure. And boy, did the cracks show rapidly. One of the most glaring discrepancies was her foundational story. She initially insisted she put Cora down for a quiet nap in her crib and that the baby just spontaneously started seizing. But when Doretta and Doreen rushed back inside after Holly yelled for help, where did they find the baby? Not in the crib. Cora was already packed up in her car seat. When they pressed her on this, Holly finally admitted she'd been preparing to leave the house to buy diapers and drop off a drink for her husband at work. That detail entirely contradicts the whole nap time story. She wasn't putting the baby to sleep at all. She was packing her up to run errands. Let's look at how her story actually builds and shifts during the police interrogation. As detectives confronted Holly with the hard facts that she was alone and her timeline made zero sense, her story devolved. Step 1, she abandoned the unexplained medical seizure narrative. Step 2, she suddenly claimed she accidentally tripped over a large plastic toy monster truck in the living room while carrying the baby. But when detectives pointed out that the injuries were way too severe for a single fall, we reached Step 3. Holly confessed she actually dropped the baby not once, but twice, from about 3 feet high, claiming she lost her balance because she felt dizzy. But investigators knew that even dropping an infant twice from a height of 3 feet simply does not explain the horrific damage Cora sustained. During the interrogation, a police detective laid this brilliant logical trap to break right through her shifting excuses. He looked at her and said, "You can't change the laws of physics. You can't change the gravitational pull." It was such a powerful moment in the investigation. He was basically telling her, look, no matter how many times you revise your story, the physical mechanics of a simple fall from your arms just could not generate the massive amount of force required to cause this baby's injuries. Let's get into Exhibit C, the state's medical evidence. The laws of physics always leave a physical record on the human body, and the medical findings here unequivocally refute a simple accidental fall. What's truly revealing is how perfectly the clinical data juxtaposes Holly's claims. Look at these findings. Doctors discovered scattered skull fractures on opposite sides of the baby's head. Like the detective pointed out, falling and hitting one side of your head doesn't magically fracture the opposite side. Plus, Cora suffered traumatic brain bleeding, which requires an immense amount of force. And perhaps the most damning piece of all, she had broken ribs.
Medical experts will tell you infant bones aren't set like adult bones. They are incredibly flexible and still growing. It takes a massive, violent amount of force to snap a 2-month-old's ribs. A simple tumble to the floor does not do this.
And then there's the physical evidence from the crime scene itself. Remember that large plastic toy truck Holly claimed she violently tripped over? Well, when police documented the living room, they found that exact plastic toy truck, but it was entirely undisturbed. In fact, crime scene photos revealed it was covered in a pristine, unbroken layer of dust. You cannot violently kick and trip over a toy without disturbing the dust settling on top of it. It's just impossible. This single, surprising detail completely, utterly dismantled her narrative of an accidental fall.
Now, for Exhibit D, digital breadcrumbs.
Holly's actions extended way beyond just physical lies. She left behind a digital footprint that proved a clear, immediate consciousness of guilt. When police finally unlocked her phone, and this was after Holly intentionally provided fake and highly offensive passcodes just to hinder their progress, they uncovered a chilling deleted search history. While still at the crime scene, before Cora had even been fully evaluated by doctors, Holly was searching Google. She searched, "Can a seizure cause a brain bleed? Will a 2-month-old survive a brain bleed? And what happens if a baby has a fractured skull?" Why does this matter? Because she was supposed to believe the baby just had a spontaneous seizure or a minor fall. These searches prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that Holly knew the exact, horrific extent of the physical trauma to Cora's skull and brain long before the medical professionals did.
Finally, Exhibit E, the verdict and the past.
As the evidence mounted, an even darker shadow fell over the investigation. Holly's own mother-in-law brought forward a hesitant confession about a cold case that blew this whole investigation wide open. Investigators learned this actually wasn't the first time a baby had suffered catastrophic head trauma in Holly's care. Look at the haunting similarities between these two events. Back in 2018, in Oklahoma City, Holly met a mother on Facebook and began babysitting her 3-week-old infant. Just days later, the baby suffered multiple skull fractures and tragic brain bleeding, resulting in death. Because Holly was the only one present and she claimed it was an unknown medical event, police at the time couldn't definitively prove the injuries happened by her hands. Fast forward to 2023 in Ponca City. Holly met Cora's mom on a Facebook group. Days later, 2-month-old Cora suffers scattered skull fractures and a brain bleed. It is an undeniable, absolutely haunting pattern of behavior.
Faced with the overwhelming weight of the timeline, the medical science, the undisturbed dust, and her own digital searches, the legal system finally closed in. In November 2024, Holly Shepard pled no contest to felony child abuse in Cora's case and was sentenced to life in prison. Following this conviction, in 2025, the 2018 cold case was reopened and Holly was officially charged with first-degree murder for the death of that 3-week-old infant. But in the midst of all this darkness, there is a profound ray of light. Against all medical odds, baby Cora miraculously survived her horrific injuries. Despite ongoing health complications, she bravely fought through and celebrated her 2nd birthday in April of 2025.
This explainer really reveals the immense power of methodical forensic evidence. It shows us how timelines, medical facts, and digital footprints can combine to speak for victims who are just too small to speak for themselves. And it leaves us with a provocative thought to consider. When a suspect's words so clearly defy the actual laws of physics, how many other tragic accidents might actually be hiding in the shadows, just waiting for the evidence to bring them to light? Thank you so much for joining me to unpack this compelling case. Keep questioning the evidence and keep seeking the truth.